Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
I run a Fortune 500 company. You run errands. Victoria's words hit me like a slap across the face at the dinner table, spoken with the casual cruelty of someone discussing the weather. The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Our guests, the Hendersons from next door, shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, suddenly fascinated by their salmon. My name is William Ashford, and I've been married to Victoria for 12 years. Once upon a time, I thought I knew her. Once upon a time, I thought we were partners. That was before she climbed the corporate ladder, with the determination of a woman possessed, leaving me somewhere around the third rung. Will handles the domestic side of things, she continued, her smile sharp as broken glass. It frees me up to focus on what matters. What matters? Not us, not our marriage, not the life we'd built together when she was just another ambitious MBA, and I was working 60-hour weeks in corporate consulting. No, what mattered now was her corner office on the 40th floor of the Meridian Building, her stock options, and her reputation as the youngest CEO in her company's history. I forced a smile and reached for my wine glass. Someone has to keep the home fires burning. Exactly. Victoria's laugh was crystalline and cold. Will's become quite the domestic expert. You should see how he organizes my dry cleaning. The Hendersons excused themselves shortly after dessert. I couldn't blame them. The tension in our dining room was suffocating. After they left, Victoria disappeared into her home office, the converted spare bedroom where she held her evening conference calls with Tokyo and London. I cleaned the dishes, wiped down the counters, and tried to ignore the familiar sting of humiliation. This was my life now. Victoria earned 7 figures annually. I managed the household. She made decisions that affected thousands of employees. I decided whether we needed more milk. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you time to observe, time to notice patterns, time to pay attention to details that busy, important people overlook. Like the fact that Victoria had started working late 3 nights a week, always on the same nights. Like the way she'd begun scheduling strategy sessions that never appeared on her official calendar. Like the mysterious wellness retreats that coincided perfectly with board chairman Richard Thornton's business trips. I'd been running errands for 12 years. But lately, I'd started wondering what errands my wife was running. 3 weeks after the dinner party incident, I found myself doing something I'd never imagined, investigating my own wife. It started innocently enough, organizing her receipts for tax purposes, a task she'd delegated to me along with everything else domestic. That's when I found the Cartier receipt. 2 platinum bracelets, custom engraved. Total cost, $8,000. The date, last month. The engraving specifications, V plus R. V for Victoria. R for, well, that was the question, wasn't it? I sat in Victoria's home office, staring at the receipt. My hands weren't shaking. I was surprised by how calm I felt. Maybe I'd been expecting this moment for longer than I'd admitted to myself. Richard Thornton, board chairman. 54 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that comes from inherited wealth and unearned privilege. He'd been Victoria's mentor when she first joined the company, back when she was just another ambitious director, clawing her way up the corporate hierarchy. I'd met him at company events over the years. He had a way of looking through people like me, the spouses, the plus ones, the domestic accessories. His wife, Elizabeth, was different, sharp, connected, with her own money and her own power base in Chicago's philanthropic circles. I photographed the receipt with my phone, then carefully placed it back in Victoria's file folder. Evidence. I was collecting evidence now, though I wasn't sure yet what I planned to do with it. Over the next week, I became a student of my wife's schedule. Victoria was nothing if not organized, her calendar synced across 3 devices, her travel itineraries meticulously planned. She thought I only paid attention to the domestic details, but I'd always been good with patterns. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Richard's board retreats matched Victoria's strategy sessions. His business trips aligned perfectly with her client meetings in the same cities. When he attended the leadership conference in Denver, she had a sudden urgent meeting with their Colorado subsidiary. I started taking notes, dates, times, locations, the kind of documentation that would make a private investigator proud, the kind of evidence that could change everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Working late again, don't wait up. It was the third time this week. I checked Richard's social media, a corporate LinkedIn post about late night strategy sessions, preparing for tomorrow's challenges. Posted 20 minutes ago. I poured myself a scotch and opened my laptop. Time to do some real research. Elizabeth Thornton was easier to research than I'd expected. Chicago Society pages loved her. The philanthropist wife of a Fortune 500 board chairman, always perfectly dressed at charity galas and cultural events. Her Instagram account was public, filled with carefully curated images of her life. Art gallery openings, fundraising dinners, volunteer work at the Children's Hospital. She looked like someone who valued loyalty. More importantly, she looked like someone who wouldn't tolerate betrayal. I spent the evening building a profile of Richard's marriage. Married 23 years. 2 grown children. A Lake Forest mansion worth $3 million. Elizabeth served on the boards of 4 major charities and had her own investment portfolio worth an estimated $50 million. This wasn't a woman who would quietly accept her husband's infidelity. My phone rang. Victoria, calling from her late meeting. Hi, honey, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Just wanted to let you know I'll be very late tonight. This client situation is more complex than we anticipated. In the background, I could hear soft jazz music and the clink of glasses. Not exactly the soundtrack of a corporate crisis meeting. No problem, I said. I'll leave dinner in the refrigerator. You're wonderful, Will. I don't know what I'd do without you. The irony was almost amusing. She was about to find out. After hanging up, I returned to my research. Richard's calendar was harder to access, but Victoria's assistant Maya had always been friendly to me. A quick call about coordinating Victoria's schedule yielded more information than I'd expected. Oh, Mr. Ashford. Yes, Mrs. Ashford mentioned she'd be in meetings until very late tonight. Something about the Meridian Project with Chairman Thornton. The Meridian Project. I'd never heard Victoria mention it, and I'd been handling her correspondence for months. Right, the Meridian Project, I said smoothly. She's been so focused on it lately. All those evening strategy sessions? Absolutely, Maya agreed. They've been working so closely together on this. Very hands-on leadership, you know? I thanked Maya and hung up. Then I opened my laptop and searched the company's public documents, press releases, and financial reports for any mention of the Meridian Project. Nothing. No project by that name existed. But the Meridian building was where Victoria's company had its headquarters, where Richard's office occupied the entire 42nd floor, where they'd apparently been having their strategy sessions. I made another note in my growing file. The evidence was mounting, but I needed something concrete, something undeniable. That's when I remembered Victoria's gym bag. She'd been going to a new fitness club lately, an exclusive place downtown that catered to executives. She always packed her bag the night before, leaving it by the front door so she could grab it on her way to work. I waited until she was in the shower, then quietly unzipped the bag. Workout clothes, towel, water bottle, and a phone I'd never seen before. A second phone. Locked, but the notifications were visible on the screen. 3 unread messages from R. Looking forward to tonight? The usual place? You're incredible, V. I took photos of the screen, then carefully placed the phone back where I'd found it. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled. I felt like a different person, someone capable of cold calculation and strategic thinking. Victoria had taught me something valuable over the years. Even if she hadn't meant to. She'd shown me how to plan, how to execute, how to think 3 steps ahead. Now I was going to use those lessons against her. The next morning, Victoria left for her early meeting with her gym bag and secret phone. I waited exactly 30 minutes, then made my first call. Doug's Bar and Grill. This is Doug. Doug Kellerman had been my friend since college, one of the few relationships that had survived Victoria's rise to power. He owned a bar in Lincoln Park and had the kind of street-smart intelligence that came from 20 years of listening to people's problems. Doug, it's Will. I need a favor. What kind of favor? You sound different. The kind that requires discretion and possibly some creative problem solving. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Doug's empty bar, laying out my evidence like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Doug listened without interruption, occasionally raising an eyebrow but never questioning my methods. So what's the plan? He asked when I finished. I need more evidence, concrete proof, photos, documentation, something that can't be explained away. Doug nodded slowly. I might know someone who can help with that. My cousin Alex, he's got a security consulting business, ex-cop. Very discreet. Alex Kellerman turned out to be exactly what I needed. A professional who understood evidence collection and legal boundaries. He was younger than Doug, with the careful manner of someone who'd seen enough human nature to never be surprised by it. Your wife's been careful, he said after reviewing my documentation, but not careful enough. These patterns are clear as day to anyone who knows what to look for. What do you recommend? We need photos, real evidence, not just circumstantial stuff, and we need to be smart about how we get it. Alex explained the plan. Richard and Victoria's usual place appeared to be the Ritz-Carlton downtown, specifically their bar and restaurant. High-end, discreet, the kind of place where powerful people conducted business that couldn't happen in boardrooms. I've got contacts in hotel security, Alex said. People who owe me favors. We can get confirmation of their meetings, maybe even some visual evidence. Is this legal? Everything I'm suggesting is completely legal. Public spaces, legitimate surveillance, standard investigative techniques. Your wife chose to conduct her affair in public. That makes it fair game. I thought about Victoria's words at the dinner party, about her casual cruelty, her complete dismissal of my worth, about the years I'd spent supporting her ambitions, while she slowly erased me from her life. Do it, I said. The photos arrived 3 days later. High-resolution images that told the story better than any words could. Victoria and Richard at a corner table leaning close together. Victoria's hand on Richard's arm. Richard kissing Victoria's cheek as they left the restaurant. The timestamp showed they'd been meeting twice a week for the past 2 months. Always the same table. Always the same intimate body language. Alex had also obtained hotel records, not through any illegal means, but through a contact who'd simply confirmed what the public records already showed. Richard maintained a corporate suite at the Ritz-Carlton. The suite had been used extensively in recent months, always on the same nights Victoria worked late. This is enough, Alex said. More than enough. I stared at the photos spread across Doug's bar. My wife and her lover, captured in their moment of betrayal. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, devastating. But I wasn't ready to confront Victoria yet. I had a different plan in mind. I was going to give the evidence to Elizabeth Thornton. Elizabeth Thornton's charity gala was held at the Chicago Art Institute on a crisp Thursday evening in October. I'd seen the invitation on Victoria's desk, an elegant cream-colored card requesting the pleasure of her company at a fundraiser for children's literacy programs. Victoria had declined, claiming a scheduling conflict. Richard, according to the society pages, would be attending solo. I'd never crashed a high society event before, but I discovered it was surprisingly easy. A rented tuxedo, a confident manner, and a donation check for $500 got me through the door without question. The gallery was filled with Chicago's elite, politicians, business leaders, philanthropists, and their perfectly groomed spouses. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible, in the way that ordinary people always are at extraordinary events. Elizabeth Thornton was holding court near the Monet exhibit, surrounded by admirers and fellow board members. She was smaller than I'd expected, but her presence was commanding. When she laughed, people leaned closer. When she spoke, conversations paused. This was a woman who understood power. I waited until she was momentarily alone, refreshing her champagne at the bar. Mrs. Thornton, my name is William Ashford. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. She turned, studying me with intelligent eyes. Ashford, you're Victoria's husband, aren't you? From Meridian Industries? That's right, I was hoping I might have a word with you privately. Something in my tone must have caught her attention. She gestured toward a quieter corner of the gallery. What can I do for you, Mr. Ashford? I handed her a manila envelope. I thought you deserved to know the truth about your husband's recent activities. Elizabeth's expression didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten slightly on the envelope. I'm not sure I understand. I think you will when you review the...
90 days of calls to the same number. You bought a burner for her.
Give it to me.
One reason not to drop it.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Contents. I'm sorry to be the bearer of difficult news, but I felt you had a right to know. She opened the envelope carefully, scanning the first few photographs. Her face remained perfectly composed, but I noticed the slight tremor in her hands. Where did you get these? Does it matter? What matters is that they're real, they're recent, and they represent a pattern of behavior that's been ongoing for months. Elizabeth closed the envelope and looked at me directly. Why are you showing me this? Because I believe in honesty. Because I think you deserve better. And because I think Richard has underestimated both of us. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the crowd of guests moving through the gallery. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but cold. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mr. Ashford. I'll be sure to handle it appropriately. I nodded and started to walk away, but she called after me. Mr. Ashford, your wife has no idea you're here tonight, does she? No, she doesn't. Elizabeth smiled for the first time since we'd started talking. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Good, she said. I prefer to handle these situations with the element of surprise. I left the gala feeling lighter than I had in months. The evidence was out of my hands now, in the possession of someone who had both the motivation and the resources to act on it. Victoria was working late again that night. Another client emergency that required her immediate attention. I waited up, curious to see if anything would change in her demeanor. She came home at midnight, humming softly to herself, her cheeks flushed with what I now recognized as the glow of someone who'd spent the evening with her lover. How was your evening, honey? She asked, kissing my cheek absently. Quiet, I said. Yours? Exhausting. These client situations are so draining, but we made real progress tonight. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Even now, with the evidence in Elizabeth Thornton's hands, Victoria continued to lie with the casual ease of someone who'd never been challenged. That was about to change. The first domino fell on a Friday morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. I was having coffee and reading the Tribune when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Meridian Industries CEO and board chairman under investigation for ethics violations. The story was brief but devastating. An anonymous source had provided evidence of an inappropriate relationship between CEO Victoria Ashford and board chairman Richard Thornton, raising questions about conflicts of interest and corporate governance failures. The Chicago Business Journal had picked up the story within an hour. By noon, it was trending on social media. By evening, it was the lead story on 3 local news broadcasts. Victoria called me at 2 o'clock, her voice tight with panic. Will, I need you to stay away from the house today. There are reporters outside. Don't talk to anyone, don't answer the door, don't comment on anything. What's happening, Victoria? What reporters? Someone leaked information about the company. False information. My lawyers are handling it, but I need you to stay quiet until this blows over. False information. Even now, she couldn't bring herself to tell me the truth. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. I spent the afternoon at Doug's bar, watching the news coverage with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement. Elizabeth Thornton had moved quickly and decisively. The evidence I'd provided had been supplemented with additional documentation, financial records, travel receipts, communications that painted a clear picture of an ongoing affair between two of the most powerful people in Chicago's business community. Your wife's having a rough day, Doug observed, watching Victoria's deer in headlights expression during an impromptu press conference outside Meridian Industries. She'll survive, I said. She's tougher than she looks. But even as I said it, I could see the cracks forming. Victoria's carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time. The confident CEO was being replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. Richard Thornton was handling the crisis even worse. His statement to the press was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak that convinced no one. He looked like a man who'd never expected to face consequences for his actions. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. Both Victoria and Richard were conspicuously absent from the agenda. That evening, Victoria came home looking like she'd aged 5 years in a single day. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, her usual commanding presence replaced by exhausted vulnerability. "Will, we need to talk." We sat in the living room where we'd entertained the Hendersons just weeks earlier. Victoria poured herself a large glass of wine and drank half of it before speaking. "The board is going to ask for my resignation." "I'm sorry to hear that." She looked at me sharply. "Are you? Are you really sorry, Will?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'm sorry that it came to this. I'm sorry that you felt the need to lie to me for months. I'm sorry that you chose Richard Thornton over our marriage." Victoria's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. "How did you know?" "I've known for months, Victoria. I've been documenting everything. The late meetings, the business trips, the secret phone, the jewelry receipts. Did you really think I was that oblivious?" She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You gave the information to the press." "No," I said. "I gave it to Elizabeth Thornton. She gave it to the press." Victoria's face went white. "Elizabeth knows? Elizabeth knows everything. And unlike me, Elizabeth has the resources and connections to make sure everyone else knows too." We sat in silence for several minutes, the broken glass glittering between us like the fragments of our marriage. Finally, Victoria spoke. "What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. Now you learn what it feels like to have your life controlled by someone else's decisions." She looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "I underestimated you." "Yes," I said, "you did." The board meeting on Monday lasted less than an hour. Both Victoria and Richard submitted their resignations before the formal proceedings began. The company's stock price had dropped 12% since Friday, and the board was in damage control mode. Victoria's resignation statement was a model of corporate crisis management. She accepted full responsibility for her lapses in judgment and expressed confidence in the company's future leadership. She looked composed and professional on camera, but I could see the strain around her eyes. Richard's exit was less graceful. His resignation came with rumors of a messy divorce proceeding and frozen assets. Elizabeth Thornton's lawyers had moved with surgical precision, filing papers that would tie up his finances for months. I watched the coverage from my new temporary office, a corner booth at Doug's bar that had become my unofficial headquarters. Alex Kellerman joined me for lunch, bringing updates on the legal implications. "Your wife's lawyers are good," he said. "They've managed to keep her out of any criminal liability. But her career in corporate leadership is finished." "What about Richard?" "He's facing a shareholder lawsuit and a very expensive divorce. Elizabeth's team is claiming breach of fiduciary duty and demanding forensic accounting of all his business dealings. He's going to be tied up in court for years." I nodded, feeling a satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. For months, I'd felt powerless, diminished, reduced to nothing more than Victoria's domestic assistant. Now I was the one holding all the cards. Victoria had moved out of our house and into a downtown apartment. Her lawyer had advised against any direct contact while the divorce proceedings were pending. But she'd left me a note, handwritten on her personal stationery. "Will, I know you have every right to hate me. I know I destroyed everything we built together. But I want you to understand that what happened with Richard wasn't about you. It was about power, about feeling important, about being seen as more than just another executive. I lost myself in that world, and I lost you in the process. I'm sorry, V." I read the note twice, then filed it away with the rest of my evidence. An apology was something, but it didn't change the fundamental facts. Victoria had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Victoria's diminished circumstances worked in my favor. Her legal team was focused on salvaging what remained of her career, not fighting over assets. I kept the house, half the investments, and my dignity. The settlement was finalized on a gray Thursday morning in December. Victoria looked smaller somehow, sitting across from me in the conference room. The confident CEO who'd once dismissed me as an errand runner was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely uncertain about her future. "What will you do now?" she asked as we left the courthouse. "I'm thinking about starting a consulting business," I said. "Crisis management. It turns out I have a talent for strategic thinking." Victoria almost smiled at that. "You always did. I just never paid attention." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." We stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, two people who'd once shared everything and now shared nothing but history. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Victoria said finally. "I already have," I replied. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, a converted storefront in Lincoln Park, 3 blocks from Doug's bar, when Maya called. Victoria's former assistant had landed on her feet, finding a position with a consulting firm downtown. But she'd kept in touch, partly out of guilt and partly out of curiosity about how the story had ended. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Victoria's been hired by a nonprofit organization. Director of operations. It's a good position, but it's about a quarter of what she was making before. How is she handling it? Better than I expected, honestly. She seems different. More grounded, maybe. Like she's finally figured out what actually matters." I thanked Maya for the update and hung up. I was genuinely glad to hear that Victoria was rebuilding her life. Our marriage was over, but I didn't wish her any more suffering. Richard Thornton hadn't been as fortunate. The shareholder lawsuit had resulted in significant financial penalties, and his divorce from Elizabeth had been spectacularly expensive. He'd been forced to sell his Lake Forest mansion and most of his investment portfolio. Last I'd heard, he was working for a small consulting firm in Milwaukee, a significant step down from his former position. Elizabeth Thornton, on the other hand, had emerged from the scandal, stronger than ever. Her handling of the crisis had earned her respect throughout Chicago's business community. She'd been elected to 2 new corporate boards and had launched her own investment fund. I'd received a handwritten note from her shortly after the divorce was finalized. "Mr. Ashford, thank you for your courage in bringing the truth to light. I hope you find happiness in whatever comes next. E. Thornton." Courage. It was an interesting word choice. I'd never thought of myself as particularly brave. But maybe courage wasn't about fearlessness. Maybe it was about acting despite fear, about refusing to accept a situation that diminished your humanity. My consulting business was growing steadily. Word had spread about my role in the Meridian Industries scandal, and I discovered there was a market for someone who understood both corporate dynamics and strategic communications. I specialized in helping people navigate difficult situations, divorces, business disputes, reputation management. Doug joked that I'd become the revenge consultant, but that wasn't quite accurate. I didn't help people get revenge. I helped them get justice. There was a difference, though it sometimes took time to see it. 1 year after Victoria's resignation, I found myself back at the Chicago Art Institute for another of Elizabeth Thornton's charity galas. This time, I had a proper invitation. She'd asked me to serve on the planning committee for her literacy foundation. The evening was a success, raising over $2 million for children's programs throughout the city. As I watched Elizabeth give her closing remarks, I reflected on how much had changed since that first night, when I'd approached her with my envelope of evidence. "Excellent work tonight," she said, joining me at the bar as the crowd began to thin. "You have a real talent for organization." "I've had practice," I replied. She laughed. "Yes, I suppose you have. Any regrets about how everything played out?" I considered the question seriously. No. Victoria made her choices. Richard made his. I just made sure there were consequences. And now? Now I run my own business. I help people who find themselves in situations where they need to level the playing field. It's satisfying work. Elizabeth nodded approvingly. Power imbalances are dangerous things. They corrupt both sides. The powerful become careless, and the powerless become invisible. You found a way to restore the balance. As I drove home that evening, I thought about Victoria's assessment of our marriage. I run a Fortune 500 company. You run errands. She'd been wrong about both parts. She'd run something else entirely. A web of lies and betrayal that had ultimately destroyed her career. And I hadn't just run errands. I'd run a campaign. A careful, methodical, strategic campaign that had exposed the truth and restored justice to a situation that had spiraled out of control. Victoria had taught me something valuable during our years together, even if she hadn't meant to. She'd shown me that power wasn't about position or title or salary. Power was about information, strategy, and the courage to act when action was required. I'd been an excellent student. Now I was running my own show, helping others who found themselves underestimated and overlooked. The errand runner had become something else entirely, someone who understood that the most dangerous person in any conflict is the one nobody sees coming. Victoria had run a Fortune 500 company. Now she was learning to run something more important, a life based on honesty and authentic relationships. As for me, I was running exactly what I'd always been capable of running, my own destiny. The errands were finished.